Okay, Chair Audrey, we are live streaming.
Okay, welcome. So welcome everyone to the December 17th, 2021 Heritage Richmond Hill meeting. Tonight's meeting is an electronic meeting held pursuant into section 238 3-3 of the Municipal Act 2001. Due to the continued efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, city facilities will not be open to the public to attend meetings until further notice. Please note that we have received regrets tonight from Tom Chajowski, Jenica Binastra, Alwar, and Councillor Silvitz. Okay. The public had the opportunity to submit written correspondence regarding agenda matters by email to the clerk's office. All written correspondence received by noon today would have been included on the agenda, but there was none received. The public also had the opportunity to apply to appear as an electronic delegation, either by video conference or by telephone by noon today. There were no delegation requests received. As chair of the committee, I will now call the meeting to order. And the first item of business on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a mover to adopt the agenda? Doris, good. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, agenda is adopted. Okay. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, we will continue. Adoption of the previous minutes. May I get a motion to adopt minutes of the previous meeting? James, good. Okay. And any discussion? All in favor?
Oh, Madam Chair.
Hmm?
Sorry, I have one note for item 5.5, the Designation Subcommittee verbal update.
Yes.
The minutes state that on behalf of the Designation Subcommittee, Doris requested that staff provide an update on the efforts being made on digitizing all information related to heritage properties. From my recollection, I thought it was just the mapping of the heritage properties.
Okay, so is that a clarification from Doris, or is that a clarification from what's going to happen?
Clarification from Doris, if possible.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, Pamela is correct in her recollection. It was to have the team come back to the subcommittee and ultimately Heritage Richmond Hill Committee to present on the work they are doing, digitizing all of the information related to heritage sites, as opposed to all of the, I'm not sure if I'm being clear here, but what I want is an update, and I want to see the progress that's been made in digitizing the information related to heritage sites that Pamela has been speaking to us about and has presented to us on in the past.
Okay, is that clear?
Through you, Chair. So if Member Counter would be happy to move the motion that it be adopted as amended, and we will make those amendments to the minutes as required. So if you're good with that, then we will make those changes for.
I am.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, so that motion carries. We're all in favor? Okay, motion carries. Okay. Okay. I think before we begin with the rest of the agenda, I think we can welcome Kandambi Raj. So I think we all will wave to Kandambi, and we can't go shake your hands. I am fortunate that I know you well for a number of years, Kandambi, and I'm very glad that you are part of this committee. So, Kandambi, is it appropriate for Kandambi just to say a few words about, give us a background of what he's about? Ryan?
I've been a volunteer, and I'm with the Hindu temple, actually working for a long time. And through the Hindu temple and also through the Heritage Committee of Council of Richmond Hill. We had the doors open. I think Councillor David West was the chairman when we first started into it, and it has been very active. And in addition to that, I've been working and volunteer with the community with not just with our Hindu temple, with other other committees. And when they have functions, we get some kind of cultural activity from the Ganesha temple. And that's how I come to know a lot of people during March, because I've attended quite a few of our Tuesday meetings a couple of years ago. And after that, I gave up. And I'm only 82 years young, and I try to do my volunteer work left of the time I have. And that's why I'm here. I'm already on the Accessibility Advisory Committee this year, this session. And this is just a try for this remaining 8 months or so, whether it is, I'm happy with it, and you others are the committees happy with me. Take it from there for the next election.
Okay. Well, welcome, Kadami. I think you're here.
Thank you.
Your general nature, your intelligence, your wisdom, I welcome very much for this
Thank
committee.
you.
So thank you. However it happened that you were on the committee, I'm glad it happened. So
Okay.
thank you for that. Okay. Okay. So we are on to okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. We've done, okay, so we have an extract for the council meeting C-4821 held on November 24th, 2001. Can I have someone move that? David, okay. Any discussion? No? All in favor? Okay. No, no one opposed? Okay, so the motion to receive that is carried. Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to our, we have no delegations. So we'll move on to our scheduled business. So 5.1, do we have someone to move 5.1 delegated authority for minor heritage permits, discussion by Joanne Young and Pamela. So do we have someone to move that? Okay, Doris, good. Okay, we do have Al, who could not be here, has asked there's something be read into the recorded in the minutes. So I will just read that now. I believe some of you will have received it, but yeah, I'll read it now. Okay. Upon reviewing the proposed definition of minor work, it is clear that it is a circular in nature, and so it is not suitable. The word small is substituted in some instances, while in others the word minor is used. Any useful definition cannot contain the word to be defined and use a similar adjective as has the same effect. Okay. Accordingly, while I support a definition of the phrase minor work, I now think it's best for the purposes of practicality that the term not be defined and the staff be given discretion to determine when any application falls within this category. The reality is such that if staff grant a permit under this category, any applicant is unlikely to dispute such a finding, and if staff do not, and the applicant disagrees, the default application route will be followed with all the necessary checks and balances in place. Consequently, while a proper definition would be ideal, it is unlikely that it would ever be material to the proper administration of staff's duty. Okay, so that is what Al's points are. So let's have a discussion on that. I have some points, but I want to hear from the rest of you first on this. We were given that list. We discussed it last time. So any more discussion on that? Doris, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to begin with, I want to seek clarification. This proposed draft definition for minor alterations is one that the staff of City of Richmond Hill came up with. It's not something that's found in the Ontario Heritage Act, because I went back and looked and I couldn't find this definition. So I am working on the assumption that the city folks have drafted this definition for us to consider for adoption as a tool as they look at minor alterations to properties. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Pamela. So I've read, I had the opportunity to read Al's comments and to read the proposed draft definition. And I get what he's saying in terms of, it appears that the definition is circular because we use the word small and minor in defining minor alterations. And I think from my perspective, I think what we need to do is continue editing the definition so that we don't use those words. And rather than try and define minor, what we should continue is building the list of examples that we have stated here so that people have a basic understanding of what a minor alteration would be, as opposed to trying to define a minor alteration through words. If we could have a list of minor alterations, a more comprehensive list, I think that would explain to folks what we mean by a minor alteration. And having that more comprehensive list would probably help staff as they assess these types of permits to determine if they are permits for minor alterations and therefore can be processed through a staff process, as opposed to something that this committee might be required to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. Okay, David?
Okay, I need to maybe ask a couple of questions before I make what I think is likely going to be my comment. Can staff just quickly summarize what the purpose of doing this is?
Through the chair, Councillor West, last month, we actually brought up a discussion on the nature of minor heritage permit and how that the process can be simplified and shortened so that it doesn't necessarily need to go through Council and Heritage Richmond Hill to consider a minor alteration of a designated property. So we presented a series of benchmarking examples from various municipalities in Ontario and demonstrated that this is a practice that's been, used for a long time by many different communities. So we are here today to continue with the discussion because a lot of the minor heritage permit, well, they have to be identified and enacted by bylaw. And in the bylaw, which is approved by council, the bylaw often define what minor heritage permit would be. So we are just following this example of somehow defining or illustrating what a minor heritage permit is to actually facilitate this discussion.
Okay. So can you just is it possible, and if you can't, it's okay, but can you give me an example of where, so I live in a heritage building, I want to do something like repainting the facade or whatever of the building. At the present moment, without this modification in our procedures, what would it have to go to Heritage Richmond Hill? Yes. Okay. And what you're saying in this regard, the example I'm giving you with the painting is that if I'm going to paint it in roughly the same color or with some sort of a heritage color that works, then we can bypass Heritage Richmond Hill and bypass any extra cost, expense, time, whatever, and just get on with it.
Yes. So then this process is actually administered by staff. Okay. Of course, staff support, then this will just automatically be approved.
Okay, but if I'm the owner of the building, I do not have to go through, like, okay, so the spring comes and I decide that I want to repaint my house because I have the time to do that. And instead of applying to do all this stuff and getting the permit, goodness knows when, I can actually get sign off from the staff pretty quickly. And by May or June, I'm painting my house.
That's right.
Okay, so I wanted I'm absolutely thrilled if people are not going to agree with me on this. That's okay, But I want to share a perspective that I see as a counselor. And the perspective is this. Councillor West, I'm really upset. I own this heritage house and I've got to jump through hoops and red tape to paint my house. And as a counselor, that really resonates with me, because the homeowner owns that house and it's a huge investment for any of us to own a house, and all they want to do is something that's minor. And I mean, I get what Al's saying about the definition of minor, and that's a very good point. But I think what the spirit and the intent, and I cannot imagine that the spirit and intent wouldn't be achieved by this or something very similar to this, is that all of that administration on a building that the person owns could be bypassed to allow them to do something which is actually minor. And one of the problems that I really appreciate people that own heritage buildings. I really do. And it is a lot of those people, have those buildings and they have a great deal of pride in the uniqueness of their homes. But the last thing that I think we need to be doing as a council or as a society is putting any extra burden on them for them owning those houses and doing good upkeep and being able to keep the house up easily. I really think if that's the spirit and intent of what this change is meant to achieve, I am all for it, because I think that we need to be making owning a heritage property as easy as possible, and it will never be totally easy. It will be a unique experience owning a heritage property, but anything that we can do to make it easier and less onerous on those homeowners, I would recommend that we do. So I don't have a problem with this. But having said that, I do appreciate the discussion here tonight. And if we don't agree on this, that's okay. We should have the discussion. And if there's something we can do to tighten up the wording, that's fine. But I think I really want to make sure we don't lose the sight of the spirit and the intention of what I believe we're trying to do here, because I totally agree with that. So anyway, those would be my comments.
Thank you, David. Would anyone else, any comments from, Brian? Yeah.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just for the public's information, member Dumay, apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. She did let us know that she was having issues with her camera, so she may flicker on and off, but we do have quorum, just for the public's information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other points? James, Dan, any other comments about this? Dan?
Sorry, I just had to get the mute off. Yeah, I wasn't around for the presentation, but just to, it's my understanding that what we're trying to do is take some of the bureaucracy out of minor changes. And when we talk about minor, I don't want to restart the discussion, but minor can mean dollar cents. It could be heritage value cents. I mean, it can be a number of different things. And I'm happy to let the heritage staff sort of define that in a way that would still allow, in principle, what Councillor West was saying. So I agree with that. I'm just I'm not sure about the wording. I'd be happy just to see more discussion on the wording or a further draft on it, because it sounds like it does need to be tightened up. So I support it in principle, but I guess the devil's always in the details. I'm confident that staff is doing this to reduce some of the bureaucratic burden. In principle, I believe there are more important things that the committee needs to review and talk about in giving advice to council, and for council to be involved in these minor things. So I fully support that.
Any other comments? Barb, James? Condembi, I'm going to leave you off the hook here. So, yeah. Okay. Okay, Barb?
Yeah, through the chair. I like what David said, or Doris said, about adding more definitions of what would be small or minor work, because then it makes it clearer. I think to try to define minor and small and make it too legalese takes away from what we want to do with helping staff not have to end up taking on every new project. So maybe like just going with what Doris said to add more, like a longer list of what these minor or small renovations would be, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to make a couple of questions and comments at this point. In regards to the wording minor, like if I didn't put minor in there, I would put not major. So I almost like, I think we might as well stay with the word minor and just, just go from there. In terms of the points, I actually presented this to the Historical Society executive, and they actually confirmed some of my concerns. We went through the list of these 7 bullet points, and bullet 4 and 5 jumped out at us. The addition, removal, replacement, or alteration of lighting fixtures. Like a lighting fixture really could be integral to the heritage aspect. So I don't think you'd mean just changing a light bulb. I think it means more than that. So maybe you want to change that or take it out. And alteration to hard landscaping features, including walkways, driveways, and fences, that could be major as well. So, if it's, I think of times that we've had, I think with the DDO, I know that's a big, not just a heritage property, but there was landscaping there. So, a huge tree, I don't think we can just arbitrarily say that we can, a hedge with that. So I would like those 2 points, which I'm calling point 4 and 5, to not be in there for this point. So those are my points for this discussion. David?
Sorry about that. Okay, so good points, I think, and I can I just, again, just a question to staff. So what exactly what is your interpretation of a lighting feature? Is that a light fixture?
Through the chair, I think that in this instant, it would be a light fixture that has no or limited heritage attribute value. We do not just look at the project in isolation. We look at it within the context of this whole cultural heritage value of the entire property. So often the lighting feature would not be from the original time of the house. Sometimes when there was inappropriate style and someone wants to replace it to something that more historically appropriate, they don't necessarily need to go through a heritage permit because it is for that nature. And I think, with the wording and the definition or the defining what is minor and major, I think the committee also needs to provide a certain level of confidence in staff in being able to discern what is actually an important attribute. For instance, certainly for the David Dunlap Observatory, the cultural heritage landscape include a lot of the elements that should be considered by Heritage Richmond Hill, but not every single property is a cultural heritage landscape. So again, in order for us to provide as much support as a heritage house owner, there often have changes to the landscaping that might not have any relationship to the cultural heritage value of the property. And those are the things that we want to identify so that it will not necessarily go through another process where we know that as we review it, that it actually doesn't have the same kind of impact as those that is identified as an attribute.
Okay, actually, and that was the second point I was going to make, is that, like, do we even have jurisdiction over, like, let's say that they did want to change the light fixture in the front porch. Would we actually have jurisdiction over that type of thing? But more specifically, like in the Dunlop Observatory lands, if I'm not mistaken, that is a cultural landscape that's preserved. But in the situation of a house on one of the streets in Ward 4, for example, the landscape is not designated. It's just the house, right? Just the building.
Yes, but all depending on, of course, how it was defined from the designating bylaw. Generally, we do not have any description of the landscape because, you know, usually when by the time it became a property owned by a middle-class person, that whatever land that they originally has been, you know, located would have been subdivided. I mean, there's a lot of original context would have been lost. Yep. So I think that the definition provides more detail, more minute elements, but it's not meant to be constraining. It was just as examples of what could be.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I just am concerned that this, to me, is a positive step forward in streamlining the administration of owning a heritage property, and I think it sends more of a message that if you want to do something that is minor to your property, and it's not going to take away from the value of that property in a historical context in our neighborhoods, then you go ahead, you know, and we'll approve it quickly, and the staff can deal with that. You don't have to go through any extra expense. And I'm just afraid that if we are, you know, if we're too picky and we're going to be not giving staff the ability to work with the homeowner on that level, I do trust staff to make these determinations. I mean, I can't imagine that staff would ever, I mean, any staff member that has a qualification for heritage would not allow something over the top to happen. And I really think that there's a lot more value in allowing this streamlining of the process than there is in creating any sort of bumps along the road. So, thank you.
Doris?
So, Councillor West, I don't think any of us are disagreeing with you. I think we all support the initiative, but I think what we're looking for, at least from my perspective, what I'm looking for is a more comprehensive list that staff can use as a guide, because this is a new process that we are proposing be introduced, and I think we're all supportive of it. But I think in introducing any kind of a new business process like this, it's always good to have a good supporting or guidance document so staff know how to adopt the new business process so that it meets its ultimate goal, which is an expedited review process. So for me, having a more comprehensive list not only helps owners of heritage properties have a better understanding of what a minor variance is, and have a better expectation of how quickly their permit will be turned around. It also, with a good comprehensive definition, that can be used as a tool by staff to help guide them in their decisions related to these minor variances. So I have no objections to the process that's being proposed. I would just like to see a more comprehensive definition, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Doris. Again, I've got a couple of points here. The issue with the lights, David, I'm going to take exception to you. We're having, I'm thinking of an example of Dan's trying to get some more recent buildings being on the heritage list. Say the library, the theater. Those were the point raised that that there wasn't lighting back then doesn't apply to some heritage points. So I think we do need to consider lights for that reason, that we can't just say way back then they didn't have lights, so that's why we don't have to worry about it. I don't think we can say that. Okay. And I'm making the assumption, I'd like staff to confirm this, that this document, this proposed draft definition, will be made public, so homeowners will see it, correct? So I think that's another reason to have a good list in front of us. And the last question I have is, can you give us an sort of an estimate of the number of applications that would be of a minor variance you would get in a year? I have no sense if it's 3 or 30.
I'll have Pamela answer this question.
Just bringing it up right now. I tabulated that somewhere and I'm trying to remember where I did. It's slowly been getting more and more. Oh, it was in my...
These are in your presentation from last month.
Okay, just a moment.
Dan, you got your hand up while we wait? Or is that just you clicked on something?
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple comments and I guess a clarification. So one comment is, we're talking about designated properties only here, not listed properties. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And those designated properties are already defined as what the heritage aspects are, right? The heritage attributes, right? And so the wording really only is to those particular attributes in the property. As I understand it, somebody could go in and change anything in the property that really doesn't relate to what's specifically listed in the bylaw. Is that correct? So somebody could, for example, change the gutters on the outside of the house if it wasn't listed as a heritage attribute.
That's correct. That would be a minor permit, not considered a major one, because it would not be considered a heritage attribute. It's altering something that is not original or is not contributing to the property's cultural heritage value.
Right. So by definition, it's whatever's listed as an attribute is what we're talking about with these minor variances. Anything outside of that would be just the normal course of events that wouldn't go through the Heritage Committee. Is that correct? Like, I'm trying to fine tune this down to, we've already defined specifically what we're concerned about with regards to the heritage attribute that the committee and the council would be interested in if anything was to change on it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. As an example, a typical designating bylaw for houses in the village core area, for instance, would generally talk about the 4 elevations and the roof. And so if there's painting to be done on the outside, and if the painting they're going to actually use a historical color, but it might be slightly off color from the original color, those typically without this process will also need to go through Heritage Richmond Hill and Council. So when we are talking about the attribute, we're actually talking about sometimes the reversible work like painting that can be, adjusted, and that, so those are parameter in which we think about minor. For instance, if your porch is broken and you need to fix it, and it's a repair. So typically a repair, we don't even ask for a heritage permit. But if you are painting it different color or you're introducing a new porch, but it is very close to the original. So those are projects that we feel, that we understand it will contribute to the heritage look of the property and will not distract from it. And that's the kind of work that we think could go through a minor permit system.
Okay, so like I wasn't I'm not clear actually how detailed our description is of a heritage property with the attributes. Is it very detailed? I always thought it was very generalistic and not very specific.
That's correct. Most of the designating bylaw were developed about 35 years ago. So the regulation 906 was not really there. So there's not a huge amount of detailed description on the architecture, for instance, of the houses. We have some that is more detailed. For instance, a more important building, we certainly get more information about it. But for domestic building, generally, we only, probably have description of the style and the style of the window and the architectural form. Other than that, there might not be a lot of information.
So is there a documentation, I guess to some of Doris's point, is there like a best practices documentation from these other municipalities that use this process, or in internationally, best practices or guidance or guidelines that can be like an ISO type of, thing for heritage that exists? Because surely we're not the only ones that would have, wanted to look at this particular matter, right?
Through the chair. So what happened was actually in November, the Heritage Richmond Hill, Pamela actually did a presentation, and that presentation can be seen online on the YouTube channel, where we actually talked about the benchmarking with about 20 municipalities surrounding in Ontario, and canvass how many of the municipality adopted this kind of process, and what kind of information do they provide with this kind of process. So we did a small benchmarking last month.
But there is this reference documentation that, and I guess to some extent it's a little bit beyond just the definition of what minor means, but it is a best guidance practices to use in determining, you sort of saying this is minor versus major. Is that correct?
Pamela, I think that it's best that you answer this question, because you'll be processing the permits.
Yeah, generally, we also look at federal policies. There's the Canadian, forget the exact title, but the Standards and Guidelines for Historic Places in Canada, and they identify what is considered appropriate work and what is not considered appropriate work. So generally, if something is, like Joanne already mentioned, it's not easily changeable. If they are removing, significantly altering heritage attributes, then they're not considered to be minor in nature. So even if there isn't a specific list of heritage attributes for a property, that we can review these policies and determine whether the proposed work is in line with these federal standards and guidelines or not, and then therefore determine whether it is minor in nature or not.
Okay, so in our definitions, do we refer to those documents or not?
No, this is our definition is standalone based on the definitions used by other municipalities across Ontario.
Okay, but shouldn't there in some ways be a reference to these guidance documents that you'll be using as a foundation to make your decisions? That would be a general question that I would ask, is when you're considering the wording, that's all. That's all I have.
And to you, Madam Chair, I found an answer to your question. We received 5 heritage permits this year so far, and 4 of the 5 of them are considered minor in nature.
Okay.
And if I can raise another point too, I've noticed that a lot of the concerns are with the list of examples or the specific types of work. If you want to note that the definition starts with work that is considered by staff to have a neutral or positive impact on the property's heritage attributes and which is small in nature. So just asking for the committee if this is something that they would be okay with, or if this is something that maybe will help to appease some of the concerns that people have. If perhaps the next wording for the following sentence, this work includes, but is not limited to the following, instead have it examples of this type of work includes, but is not limited to the following. If that might be a little bit more amendable.
Yeah, I think referring to it as examples, I like that. And I'm wondering, can you just not use the word small in nature, like work that is, anyways, address Al's point, and that is not use the word small. But not major, I don't know. So, okay. Anyways, yeah, I think if you did that, but I also would question the idea of lighting as putting that as an example. That's just my preference. The issue with landscaping, yeah, so anyways. Okay, is there any more discussion on this point? Yes, Doris. Hope you're on mute, Doris.
Sorry. We've given some good feedback and some good input to the staff, and maybe what we can do is ask them to go back to the drawing board, get rid of the word minor and small in the definition, not at the beginning in the introductory paragraph, but further down in the definition, and put together a more comprehensive list of examples and address the concerns that you've raised with some of the examples and bring that back to us to review. I think that we probably would be in a good position to fully support it, because I think everyone supports the initiative. I think we just want to make sure that we've got a tighter definition of what a minor variance is, so that our staff, the city staff, have a good sense of what we mean by a minor variation, and then can act on those permits when they come in.
Okay. Thank you. So, okay. Now I think I need some, Brian, do I need to be all in favor of accepting this report with this discussion?
Through you, Chair, yeah, if the session is done, then you would call the vote.
Okay, so are we ready to accept, to conclude this discussion and accept?
Can I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm not clear what we're voting on. Are we voting, Doris? I think in fairness, you're asking for this to be referred back to staff for some modifications. I think that is really the motion that you intended to move. Is that correct?
That was my recommendation. So yes, we can turn that into a motion, that this definition be referred back to the staff so that they can take into consideration the input and the advice they got today, do additional research to give us a more comprehensive list of the types of minor variations that would be acceptable to go through this expedited review process, permitting review process.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that, Madam Chair, just to make sure we all know what we're voting on.
Thank you. I needed that. Okay. Ryan, do we need to have a motion written up, or is Doris's verbal reiteration of that sufficient?
Through you, Chair, if all the members are in agreement with what was just verbally said, then we can just use that, and we will make sure that the minutes reflect what was discussed and the motion that is being brought forward.
Okay. Okay, so Dan, is your hand raised, or?
Yeah, yes, I just thought, are we voting on receiving this and then the motion? So there's two votes, just to be clear?
We have received it already, so I'm questioning that. Ryan?
Through the chair, we can have that all the discussion and the comments from the Heritage Richmond Hill regarding the delegated authority for minor heritage permits be received for consideration, and by that being received by staff for consideration in the definition for minor heritage permits. If that works for, and I can bring this up on the screen, actually, give me 1 second here. This works for, and I guess perhaps if through Doris, I guess in the creation of the definition for minor heritage permit. So I throw that to the member to determine if that is reflects what they're looking for.
Doris?
I am fine with this motion. My only comment would be that I think the definition's already been created, and I think what we're asking them is to go away and edit the existing definition. So for consideration, be received for consideration in further refinements to the definition for minor permits.
Do you want to add anything about examples?
We could add another sentence that would say further refinements includes drafting a comprehensive list of examples of what minor heritage permits and drafting a comprehensive list of examples of what minor heritage permits could address.
Okay, is it minor alterations to heritage? Is that what we're asking? Is it minor heritage permits or minor alterations to heritage property?
Probably minor alterations is probably better. So let me read this again. So we should say in drafting a comprehensive list of examples of minor alterations to heritage properties.
Is that, sorry, through the chair, I'm just rereading it. So be received for further consideration in making, I guess it's in making further refinements to the definition of, I guess, of minor heritage permits in drafting a comprehensive list of minor alteration to heritage properties. Is that, I don't think that's actually correct at this point.
No, I don't think it's the definition of minor, well, hang on a second. Be received for in making further definition. I would say making refinements to the definition of minor heritage permits in drafting by drafting a comprehensive list of examples of minor alterations to heritage properties.
But would you not say rather than by, that includes?
Sure.
And do we really want the word comprehensive?
You can take it out. I just think that the list that we have right now is not complete. So we need a longer list, more examples.
A detailed list? No, sorry. Anyways. Okay.
I think we're good with this.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. So, all in favor of this motion?
Through you, Madam Chair, my apologies. Okay. We have lost quorum. James has disappeared off the screen.
He's on my screen, but there
we go. He's back. There okay, thank you.
Yay.
Sorry about that, you guys. I was having a lot of difficulty hearing that through that statement. The feed was quite choppy, so I turned off my video feed to get more bandwidth.
Okay.
But I'm here.
Yeah, good. Okay. Ryan, can we vote now? Okay. All in favor?
You sure? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? No. Okay. That motion is carried. Okay. I think we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. Okay, let's move to 5.2, draft listing templates, discussion by Joanne Long and Pamela. That the discussion and all comments from Heritage Richmond Hill members regarding draft listings be received. So Pamela, I'm thinking that because both David and Dan weren't there, is it possible that you give a recap?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe that this was from a couple of months ago. This was,
Okay.
yes, it was a
Okay.
response to the draft templates that were provided by the Designation Subcommittee.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, and we, the clerk's office circulated the revised draft templates that staff created
Mhm.
for Heritage Richmond Hill's comments. And I
Okay.
can, I'm not sure if I'm able to share the screen, but I don't know if the clerk's department can.
Through the chair, Pamela, if you want to share your screen, please, by all means. We would have to look through to find these templates that you're speaking of. It might be faster for you to share, if that's possible.
Okay, thank you. So my question, are we going to be evaluating this, or what is the point? What is the state are we at with these forms?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we've revised the draft template that we provided to the
Okay.
committee based on the feedback that we received from committee members. So this is a revised version if we want, and we want to know whether there are any further refinements that are needed.
Okay.
If there are any other suggestions for how it can be further revised.
Okay. Okay. And it's only this one page. Is it possible to have it such that you see the whole document? I don't know if we can. No. So what we see in the screen is the total document. There's nothing you scroll down to.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so yeah, okay, just want to make sure with that. Okay. Okay, does any first can we move to receive this? I can't see any hands there. Barb, I see Barb waving, thank you. Okay. Discussion for this. Okay, I've only see some of you, so if you have any points. The one point I had was when I looked at the beginning was I thought I asked to have the person sort of position if they were a staff, if part of the historical society, if what their you know, what the credentials were for making that point. Okay. Okay. Dan?
Yeah, I can't see the detail or anything, but basically the original document was taken straight from the provincial guidance documents with some drop down that showed the details. So I'm not sure what exactly was changed, but it looks fundamentally the same to me. So I really don't have any major issues with anything. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other points? Doris, you're fine. Power. Okay. Okay. I guess we can vote on it then. So all in favor?
Oh, and sorry, Madam Chair, there's a second form as well, the nomination form. So I can share that as well.
Okay. Is it possible to share that? Okay.
Just a quick question. What's the difference between the two forms?
One was for someone to provide the committee with information on a specific property, why it should be, whether it meets the provincial, sorry, I got the two mixed up. This one is is that the members of the public can, sorry, I'm distracted. My son is screaming in the other room. So a member of the public, if they find a property that may be of cultural heritage value, this is a way for them to provide us with background information that will help us to assess a property, to see if further steps are needed to assess whether it does indeed have cultural heritage value. The previous document that I shared my screen on was an assessment that this would be used by Heritage Richmond Hill, by staff, by consultants that determine or assesses a property's cultural heritage value based on provincial criteria. That's Ontario Regulation 9-06, based on contextual value, historical value, or architectural value.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood then. So this is the one that I was referring to that came from the provincial. The other one is a complete rewrite, I guess, of the template that I had put together for you guys, right? So
Yes, that's correct. Through the chair, I think that it was agreed in the committee that numerical references is maybe not appropriate given the potential appeal. It's all based on the criteria set out by the Ontario Heritage Act, and I think that it was agreed upon through voting that we will proceed with this direction.
Okay. Any other questions and comments at this point? And I'm going to admit that I need a refresher on this because I didn't see this with everything that got sent in that 20-page document. So can you put this in context? We have the two forms and who's going to be using them and like, why are they brought? Again, Pamela, I'm sorry about this, but I have a feeling if I'm sort of struggling, I may not be the only one.
Let's see if I can. Oh, why is it not? So here are the two forms. So
Yes.
This would be the one that we could provide online. We could have it shared somewhere where if a member of the public identifies a property and says, this isn't, it's not on the Heritage Register, I think it should be. Here's some information. So this is the information that we would take, review, and then help us to determine whether further steps are needed to assess it for potential cultural heritage value. So this is the nomination form. And this will give us the tools we need to kind of start our research into whether it is a possible potential nominee for adding to the Heritage Register. So if we find that through this information that yes, this potentially could have cultural heritage value, let's take a closer look, then we would use this form. That's based on the provincial regulation, Ontario Regulation 9-06, to help determine whether a property has cultural heritage value. And it has three subsections. There's design or physical value, historical or associative value, and contextual value. And as we had discussed at not the last meeting, but the meeting before, I believe, of Heritage Richmond Hill, it may be better to use more general terms rather than numerical to determine whether a property does meet any one of these cultural heritage criteria. So we have, for example, here, it's strongly agree, disagree. So it's much simpler to determine because under Ontario Regulation 9-06, you need to just meet one of these criteria in order to be eligible for designation. And this is a tricky part now, though, with the new legislation that came forward which Dan, you've mentioned, this is why you brought forward a lot of these documents to us for consideration, is that the listing process is a little bit more stringent now. Before, we could just drive by a property and say that one kind of potentially could have cultural heritage value. That's enough for us to list it on, or is enough for council to list it on the heritage register. Now we need to provide more concrete reasons why it should be added to the heritage register. So we have been, heritage planners have been advised by provincial staff that we should use this same criteria, which is used for designation, to also now use towards potentially listing properties on the heritage register. So this is the reason why we've created this or revised this evaluation template to reflect Ontario Regulation 9-06. So it can help us determine whether property merits listing on the heritage register.
Okay. And this would be available on the city's website?
This second form, the evaluation one, this is, the purpose is to be used by members or like committee members, people who have experience with assessing properties for cultural heritage value. So this would
Okay.
not be used by members of the public. It'd be
Okay.
this nomination
one.
form. Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, that makes sense. Sorry about that. I just forgot about, didn't put things in context. I really appreciate the refresher on the context for this. So from the 2 months ago when we saw it and this time, you have made changes, correct?
Yes, that's correct. The more significant changes have been we've added more details to the nomination form to provide a more wholesome description of the physical attributes of a building or a property.
Okay.
And
Okay.
for the evaluation template, I don't recall what it was before. I think it was numerical, and now we've changed it to more simple. Strongly agree, disagree. There's 3 options. That's it. It's simplified.
Okay, so the one behind will be available on the city's website.
Correct. That's our intention. Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's the intention. And right now there is nothing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so right now we need to vote, have a discussion and vote if we accept these, and then if they are, then they'll be implemented. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure whether we have confirmed what the next steps are. I think this is just the preliminary steps. Joanne, if you want to step in and perhaps give more clarification.
Yes, I think that this is actually part of the process to make Richmond Hill heritage, the heritage resources of Richmond Hill a little more available and more accessible to the public. I think that the nomination, online nomination, we haven't talked about it internally from a staff perspective because we are responding to the Designating Subcommittee's initiative, and we responded to that. So once we have the forms that is generally accepted by the committee, we will go back to senior management and inform them of that, and we will discuss what is the next step.
Okay. Thank you for that. I see Dan's hand up.
Yeah, sorry. Couple comments. So when this was originally presented, I made some comments about that I thought that the staff's analysis was not really representing the presentation of process and documentation. That didn't get in any of the minutes. So I'm just going to repeat a little bit now. I don't have any problem with the listing document, the nomination form that you're going to put together. The rest of it, though, is tied very much to the process, and there's been no real, as I can understand it, been really discussion about that process. It's been more on the documents themselves, and so, Marge, I fully understand you getting a little bit confused as to, well, how does this fit in with the process? Because there's really never been a discussion on the process. So I'm sort of torn as to how to vote on this because I agree with one document. The other document I have major issues with. So if I can split my vote, if we're voting on accepting the documents, then I would vote yes on the one. And I think the second one, there needs to be a more extensive discussion about the process that was presented, because it needs to be discussed with regards to what the role the committee, the staff, the public all sort of intertwine. In this case, what we're doing is we're talking about superficial stuff, which is documentation, which, as I mentioned before, there were three parts of this process. One was the organization and how the context that the process sits in, which involves the committee, the staff, and council and the public. The second part is the part that supports the process, which is documentation, technology, how we post it, what we do with it, and all that sort of stuff. And then the third part was the process itself, which actually I was hoping there'd be a little bit more significant discussion on that, because it talks about substantial role changes here of the committee with staff. And we've never really talked about that. So I just put it to the committee that, there still is a lot more to discuss on the evaluation part and on the process itself. If you want to talk about the documentation, that's fine too. I would like to split out these two documents, because one I agree wholeheartedly with, the other one I have major issues with. So that's my comments. Thanks.
Okay, there's some internet gremlins happening in Richmond Hill today. So anyways, any other questions and comments at this point in time, as we're working through this? Did staff want to give us any more clarification on this whole process, or? Okay.
I mean, we definitely are actually working with what's submitted to us, and we are trying to find a way to bring conversation into the committee. And I think that this is actually doing its job. In terms of processes, we have not discussed it because I am not sure what processes Dan is referring to. We probably need some education from Dan as to what his expectation is. At this point, we are definitely working on digitizing the heritage information. We are working on the mapping. And once that is provided, then the nomination form, which is for the public, can potentially be attached to that. In terms of the other form, the review evaluation sheet, we fully expect that this sheet will also be required as part of the cultural heritage impact assessment to be filled up by the heritage consultants in their reports. So that is actually going to be part of so that we are sure that all the references and evaluation will be aligned with the Ontario Heritage Act's language and I guess consideration. And I think that actually stemmed from our conversation 2 months ago, where the discussion of whether the focus of evaluation should shift from the 906 consideration to a more numerical one that is, I guess, provided by some of the federal programs.
Okay. Can we?
If I can just make a couple of comments. One, with regard to the process, there is full documentation that was sent out to everybody on that, and I can talk to that at some point in the future when we get to that level. No problems with that. The other point that I made in, I guess, the September meeting was, it's not an either or as far as I'm concerned. It's not a numerical versus another approach. I said that there was a way that you could combine the two together. You don't have to choose one or the other. But if the committee prefers and the staff prefer to continue on with the same evaluation process with that, again, that's fine too. The idea was to support any challenges that we may have. And if there's another way of doing that, that staff is more, versed in, I have no issues with that. So, if staff wants to talk to me more about the documentation on the process that was mapped out, because it does show individual roles. It shows specifically how the documents flow through the process. If it's of any value, I can go over that as a separate item in a future meeting, because I think it's of value in talking about, it does make suggestions of major changes in the roles, but I think that's something that people should be aware of. To me, being knowledgeable of the points that are brought out brings good discussion as to what our roles are and how we see the future to work. And if knowing that, instead of just looking at the document itself and then trying to work backwards as to what the process is, you can define who the role should play. In other words, I had the Heritage Society involved in this. I had outside, stakeholders involved in it, that sort of thing, which, I'm not suggesting that we need to go through this. I may come to the same conclusions that, maybe it's a bridge too far for this committee at the level that we're at and with the structure that we're given. But I just want to make it clear that there was a detailed process that was presented, and we really have only been talking about documents, which to me is a very small part of the whole thing. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, Doris, please.
So, Madam Chair, being a member of the subcommittee with Dan and having worked with him, and Dan played a significant leadership role in developing this process. And yes, he did develop a process. I would suggest for purposes of tonight that we focus on the comments on the forms, provide the input and the advice, and have a motion on the forms with a request that the staff come back and discuss the process and how the forms would be used in the designation process moving forward.
Okay, that sounds good. Staff, do you have any comments, particularly to Doris's suggestion?
I think that at the expense of us looking very silly, I'm not quite sure in terms of the detailed processes that Dan is talking about. I think that we might have missed what he's trying to say, because we were working with him over the summer and we were concentrating on the form. So I probably would appreciate that maybe the next Heritage Richmond Hill meeting, Dan can provide us with a review of the consideration he has to moving forward. Given the fact that there is certain specific mandate provided by the municipality of what the Heritage Richmond Hill Committee does, and is general. We would like to maybe look at the proposed process in the context of what authority is available for Heritage Richmond Hill, and if there is other way of extending the connection to other organization. This seems to be a more ambitious discussion, and I think that maybe we can actually have another fulsome discussion in another meeting.
Okay. I am in agreement with that. I think I need guidance on with this. Do we go to defer this, accepting this 5.2? Is that what's appropriate?
Through the chair. So the scheduled business was to discuss the draft listing templates, which are the forms that Pamela
Okay.
has presented. The motion that's on the floor that was moved by Member DeMambro, excuse me, was that the discussion, all comments from the committee members regarding the templates be received. So as the Heritage Committee cannot direct staff for actions, it may be appropriate if Joanne can just, maybe discuss it, they'll take the comments back and receive them and then, they'll go down their path. And I think from what Joanne said about, going back to discuss with Member Kelly in regards to the process would be appropriate. So I think, again, through the chair that, discussion of the comments that staff will receive them and then they'll,
Okay.
take whatever actions that they may need to do from here.
Okay, so we're not really voting on the forms, we're just voting on this discussion and receiving comments. Okay, so Barb, I believe you moved the motion. So we're all in favor of accepting this discussion? Any opposed? No, okay, so that's carried. Okay, very good, good discussion. Okay, 5.3 designation subcommittee verbal update. And we will have a verbal update. Is there a verbal update for this subcommittee?
No, nothing from me. I don't know, Doris, you.
No, okay, so we have nothing to receive, so that's there. Okay. We have 5.4, which is the receiving the Toronto Star articles, the two of them, which I had read even though I read it in the paper. But the staff then, so we received those two articles, and then the staff be directed to review the latest City of Richmond Hill inventory of cultural resources using the following criteria: vacant or the appearance of being vacant for 2 years or more and or poorly maintained or in need of repairs, and listed or designated to create and maintain a sublist of properties interest. And that the staff provide HRH committee with status updates of each property every 4 to 6 months with options to protect the heritage values, so the HRH committee can provide recommendations regarding a practical course of action. So can we have someone to move to accept that?
I can't move my own motion.
Okay, we need somebody else. Thank you, James. Okay, so you've moved it. So let's have a discussion on this. I don't know, Dan, it's your motion. Do you want to start with it?
Yeah, if I can put some context behind it, just so everybody gets a sense of where we're coming from on the motion. If you recall back in June, I had made some representations on statistics of our heritage inventory. This is just a continuation on that, that if I look at the trend over the last 13 years, the heritage inventory has been reduced by about 34%. That equates to about 183 different properties. It's a trend that's downward. Again, it's just a fact. Another part of the presentation that I made in June in looking at the infrastructure, 21 property. My thought was that the process properties until they're in the very late stages of their life cycle. There's really 4 examples that specific examples that I can give the committee. One is 10-021 Yonge Street, which is Dr. Duncombe's property, which we're all familiar with, where by the time it got to the committee, it was unsafe as a building. It was a designated property. And so we really had no options with the vote to say, well, go ahead and demolish it, because that was the application that was made by the owner. There was another property, 11575 Young Street, which is also a designated property. It's Jefferson Schoolhouse. The recommendation was to demolish that building as well. Fortunately, we didn't agree with that. We had more options because it wasn't totally unsafe. There's another designated property, 33 Roseview Avenue, that was for sale in October 2020, but it was the, I think it's called the Ira D. Romer House. It's in very poor condition. The staff gave us a little bit of an update on that when we asked. And the fourth, actually, that started me on this whole process of demolition by neglect was 53 Center Street, which happened to have its porch removed without approval by the staff in the city. They were fined. I think it was about $5,000. Eventually, though, the building was demolished. It was a listed property. It wasn't designated. But my point was that we thought was that, those properties, if you review them on a regular basis, staff can only really, or has only in the past, brought things to the committee to discuss when there's an application to demolish or an application to make major renovations, or maybe splitting the property to do development, that sort of thing. To me, that's usually very late in the stage. Some of these properties have been vacant for years and years and years, and yet we have never discussed this in our committee other than us asking specific questions about them. So if we're to give council good advice, we need to have a visibility on this. So this hits on the point that I was making in June, that we need a little bit of transparency for this committee to be to council. So in doing that, I thought, well, okay, if we have 21 properties that we can focus in on, and we periodically have staff review just where they are, and I'm not suggesting that this is going to drastically change anything, but at least if you know a year or 2 years in advance that a property is not being maintained properly, you have more options on what you can do with that property, as opposed to it coming to you to this committee with an application to demolish after the building is particularly unsafe. We know how difficult it is for the city and for staff to manage these designated properties. So, we just need to sort of get a visibility on this. So hence the recommendation for us to review it on a regular basis. The 21 properties includes 13 designated properties. These are properties that are designated heritage, but they've been vacant or they're in very poor condition. And there are 8 listed properties. Now, if we look at the total of our 361 heritage properties, about 70% of them are listed. And so we really don't have a lot of controls on that in terms of preventing those properties from being demolished because of neglect, because they really don't, fall under any specific maintenance, designations or principles. So there's a lot of exposure here, and I just thought maybe being a little bit more proactive in our approach gives us a better capability to make better advice and recommendations to council. So
Okay.
that's basically the reason for the motion.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks.
Jen. Okay. We need someone to move it. So we had someone to move it, correct? Yes. Barb? No, James moved it. Yes, thank you, sir. Okay. Discussion from anyone else? David, you look ready.
So I understand what Dan is trying to do here, and I do fully agree with you that this is a very frustrating problem to have, us lose buildings or essentially be forced with only one option that, we have to allow demolition because the building has, completely been neglected and so on. Luckily, I think that there aren't that many examples of that type of thing happening, but there are enough that I can understand why we're discussing this. The only thing that there's all of the concerns that I have about this are not in the spirit of what we're trying to achieve here. It is the kind of the practical logistical concerns that doing something like this would entail. So I think probably the best way to go about this would probably be to have staff come back with a report to us on what some of the mechanisms that we have available to do this, what some of the hurdles that we may have to achieving this. I'm certainly not an expert on the processes that staff would undergo in a situation like this, but I can imagine that some of these things might run into some jurisdictional issues and also might run into some cost versus benefit, but cost alone issues. So my recommendation, I think we really need to know what some of the logistical challenges would be. And I'm not positive if we would be able to get a fulsome presentation of that tonight, but I would leave it in your hands, Madam Chair. But I think probably what I would like to see in a situation like this is to have this, have staff take a look at this. I think it merits consideration, but I think the devil is in the details of the logistics of how we would go about it. And I think the best way to get those answers would be to have staff come back and give us those answers.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Doris, Barb, James, Doris.
So I think I understand what Dan is trying to do here. And ultimately, I think what he's trying to do is ensure that we have as many heritage properties protected in the city of Richmond Hill as possible. And so he's proposing an approach to that. And I agree with Councillor West that we need to give staff the opportunity to take this into consideration to determine how best to proceed in a way that we continue being able to protect the heritage properties, but that we are not imposing a huge regulatory burden on heritage property owners or requiring additional resources from the city of Richmond Hill to be able to do this work. So I think that my recommendation is basically what Councillor West spoke to, is to give staff an opportunity to go away to think about this and come back for further discussion with the committee at a later date.
Okay. Thank you, Doris. Any other comments, questions?
If I could just make a quick comment to that, to both those comments. If you recall, we had a document called Demolition by Neglect, a discussion paper that was presented. Coming out of that was a request for staff to give us some more information about what their tools were, what they could do. And it was presented to us as a committee. We talked about the maintenance bylaws. We had, not only the heritage staff make a presentation, but we also had the bylaws person, I forgot her name, make a presentation to us as well. So I believe we've already had representation on what the process and the tools are. And if I recall correctly, there were a number of things that came out of those discussions. One was the staff were going to review some sort of registry or some sort of other document about vacant properties, that sort of thing. So I believe we've gone through that route. because nothing's really happened on it, I am suggesting that we actually do this, which it's already been done by myself in a very simple sort of manner. I'm happy to review those with staff to accelerate the process. But I would still like that staff, we vote on this to ask staff to do that from council's perspective. I don't really want to sort of go over ground that we've already gone before. So that's my my point for bringing this up in wording as it is right now. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to, my comments here, and thank you, Dan. I believe we're almost there, but what I'm hoping is that staff can put together a report. And the idea of asking you to do more work, because I know you have limited resources, limited time to do a lot of work. So if you could just put sort of a chart, like a chart together of how much work is it actually going to be? How many hours? What sort of costs? Like if we bring it towards council, I believe they always ask what sort of cost is involved in implementing any of these things. And I think we need to have that. So if David, I don't know if you could comment on that part, that it's a sort of requirement to have a costing of general nature for something like this.
Well, I don't know what the cost would be, but I mean, obviously anything that we do on council, the cost to the taxpayer is obviously going to be a consideration always. My concern is that, like, for example, and this is only one, and I mean, I don't know what I don't know. And you're right, Dan, we did have a lot of the presentations that were, a lot of the, this kind of general subjects were raised in that presentation that we had a few months ago, which actually leads me to understand that the challenges of implementing this would likely not be insignificant, but I don't know that. The one thing that jumps out at me, though, is that the last part about the HRH committee can provide recommendations regarding a practical course of action. I'm not sure what tools we have first of all, I'm not sure what tools we have as a committee to make a recommendation like that. And I would be concerned about jurisdiction that we would have as a municipality to, to regulate what's going on in that heritage property beyond the things that we have in place already, like the property standards bylaw, which is obviously going to be an important component of this. Anyway, those are the questions I have, and I wouldn't be able to vote on this without having a way forward clearly defined by staff. That's really my comment. But again, I understand the spirit and intention of this. That's obvious. I mean, we don't want heritage properties to be lost because they haven't been maintained either deliberately or inadvertently. And if there is a mechanism that we can provide to stop that from happening, then that certainly would be a good thing. Okay. That would be my comment.
Okay. Should we try to make a motion of what we are going to vote on here? Because I think, yeah, Ryan, guidance, please.
Through you, Chair. So there is already a motion on the floor that was moved by member Counter. And I can certainly display that on the screen. Give me 1 second while I just pull that up for everyone's information. So this is the motion that is currently on the floor. Certainly that can be voted on, or a motion to amend this could be done. I have listened to comments from the other members, and it sounds like perhaps Clause A would stay for a motion to amend, and that, but however, clauses B and C may not be. They might, I've heard things from either keep it or to have staff go back to do a review to determine a process. But at this point in time, this is the motion that's on the floor. And if there's a motion to amend or anything like that, that's up to the committee.
Okay. David, is your hand up there?
Yeah, so thank you, Ryan, for that. That's what I thought. Can we just clarify, we can, in a committee such as this, add possibly a D to have staff, before we take action on this, to have staff report back on the implications of this motion to a future HRH committee meeting, right?
Through the chair, yeah, we would have to craft this a little bit, but I would certainly add, we would need to modify it a little bit that, B and C are not undertaken until staff had the chance to report back to the committee. So we certainly, it would be a motion to amend unless the mover would be happy to accept a clause D to just say that staff report back first, but we can absolutely do that if we need to.
I'll leave it in your hands, Madam Chair. The problem I'm having, and I don't, this puts me in a difficult position as a member of this committee, is that I wouldn't be able to vote in favor of this just because I don't exactly know what it would mean to vote in favor of this. So I would be willing to move an amendment to have this go back to staff for a presentation. But I'll leave it in your hands as to how that you want to handle that. If that can't be accomplished in some other way, I would move the amendment.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to hear staff's comments on the motion before we start changing the wording and some of the comments that they would like to add to the discussion.
Through the chair, I think that we really don't have an alternative wording, because I think that this is actually, provided by member Dan Kelly. I think that the action described in the recommendation is what he wanted to recommend. So if it does move forward, then it will go straight to council, and council will then make a decision as to how they want to direct staff resources and time. So Heritage Richmond as a standing committee will not be able to direct staff to do work, but through council's approval, that's going to be what happens. So in terms of the detail of what can or cannot be done, we did just from we don't want to say that it is not possible, but we did try to find out ways of determining what property is vacant or not vacant. And I understand one could look at Google Earth and identify something, a property that looks like it's vacant. But for us, we actually attempted to even go through water meters and trying to confirm whether a property is actually occupied or not. And it is not as direct as we want it to be. And so we're not suggesting that we don't want to do the work, but I think that we do confront a number of obstacles. And we do work with the bylaw staff often. The current practice, as you recall, Tracy Steele's presentation, is that it's a complaint-based and not an proactive consideration. So I think that is the context right now. I will not be able to comment further on the detail of Dan's recommendation, because at this point I think we need to understand the implication of this work.
Okay. Pamela, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Madam Chair, I think Joanne summarized it pretty well.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay. My suggestion is that we vote on this, and then I think we may put forth a motion to ask staff to come back with another report. So Ryan, guidance again, can we vote on this and then put forth another motion?
Through the chair. So the agenda has to be on the schedule of business.
Yes.
I would suggest that a motion to amend would be perhaps the better way to go, because if you're going to ask staff to report on something else, that is not on the agenda.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
I think, Madam Chair, what I would recommend at this point is to add, and again, I'll take advice from the clerk, but to add a section D that says that we refer this back to staff for a report on the implications and the logistics of implementing the motion before making a final decision as a committee on the motion. And then, staff could, the committee can decide what to do with that amendment, whether they want to go ahead with it or not.
Would we vote on each section?
Well, you have to vote on the amendment first. So if the committee doesn't agree, then the amendment will get voted down. And if that happens, then we will then vote on the motion as it was originally presented. And if that goes forward, then as Ryan said, then the recommendation will go to council for their consideration.
Can we vote on each part A, B, and C separately?
You can, but what you would need to do is consider the amendment that I'm putting forward first as an amendment. And then if the committee wishes, they can vote on the individual aspects of the motion when the motion comes back to be voted on in its entirety, either with or without the amendment.
Right.
Is that
I
correct,
think I'm
Ryan?
clear.
If I can make a suggestion, then if the amendment is to ask for a review, then B and C can be deferred to some future meeting once staff gives some comments on, for example. So, it would depend, of course, on the amendment, but I have a pretty good idea what the wording will probably be. And I'm fine with that if we defer B and C after the amendment.
So I think we'll write an amendment, part D. We'll vote on that. And then we'll go through and likely part B and C, we will not vote on, but we will vote on part A of receiving the articles.
Okay,
Is
actually,
that my...
Ryan, can you just clarify this? That I don't think that's exactly right, but
Okay.
Ryan will say this way better than I did, I'm pretty sure.
Through the chair. So the part of the complication at this point is that committee cannot direct staff to do something. So a referral back to the staff to do something still has to go to council. Based on what I'm hearing, it would be my, I suppose, advice to defer clauses B and C to another meeting. I think at that point, sometime in between here, perhaps Joanne can speak with Member Kelly in regards to this, and that certainly for clause 8, in terms of receiving the article, can go forward. But I would vote sort of on these things separately. So certainly go forward with A, but defer B and C, and through that deferral to a future meeting, that perhaps some discussions, whether with staff and committee members as appropriate, be done.
Okay, that's what I intended. Thank you for saying it clearly. Okay, so now we need this amendment, D. So do you have it? You're better at doing this than the rest of us, Ryan.
So what I suggest be done is we vote on clause A only, and I will bring that up. And then from there, we can vote on a motion to defer clause B and C to a future HRH meeting. And I think we leave it at that way staff can have that discussion after. So first vote would be on clause A to receive the information, and then we can vote on a motion to defer clause B and C to a future time as one.
So we do not need amendment D?
No, I think the amendment for D, which was, for staff to report back, that would be, again, that would have to go to council.
Yes.
So I think in this
Got
case,
that.
we sort of avoid,
Yeah.
any direction to staff. We're just
Perfect.
deferring to later. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so vote on part A. All in favor? Okay, good. B and C, we're voting to defer, correct? Okay, so voting to defer. Okay, that carries unanimously. Okay, so I think we've got through that, and we'll yeah, I think that was a good discussion, and I think all of us needed a review and clarification. So thank you for staff for giving us a. Why didn't I remember that meeting? But now I remember it was the first meeting I was chair, and I had all these issues, including tornado warning. So that's my excuse for forgetting a few things. Okay, I think we're on to date of next meeting, which is February. We're almost be over winter by this point. So date of next meeting, February 15th, 7 o'clock. All in favor? Okay. Okay, not opposed, carried. Okay, can we, someone move to adjourn the meeting? Yes, Doris. Okay, thank you. All in favor?